The station had been quiet before the alarm started. Not peaceful. Space was never truly peaceful, but predictable. Cargo shipments arrived on schedule. Mining crews rotated through their shifts, and the endless hum of machinery filled the corridors like a steady heartbeat. For most of the beings living aboard Orialis Station, life was routine. Then the stars changed. It began as a flicker on the external observation arrays, a distortion where there should have been empty space. At first, the automated systems flagged it as interference, cosmic radiation, a sensor glitch, something insignificant. Then the distortion multiplied. 1 became 5. 5 became 20. By the time the alarm finally screamed through every level of the station, it was already too late. Red emergency lights flooded the corridors as thousands of civilians looked up from their daily lives in confusion that turned to fear in seconds. Doors sealed automatically. Bulkheads slammed shut. The calm, mechanical voice of the station's AI cut through the chaos. Emergency protocol engaged. All personnel proceed to designated shelter zones immediately. No one ran at first. Not until the first explosion hit. The impact rolled through the station like a physical wave, rattling metal walls and throwing people off their feet. Somewhere deep within the structure, something ruptured. The lights flickered. Then people started running. On the command deck, Commander the Lay didn't move. Her 4 eyes were locked on the tactical display hovering above the central console, her breathing slow, controlled, even as the officers around her began shouting over one another, because what she was seeing didn't make sense. "Confirm sensor data," she said, her voice cutting cleanly through the noise. "It's confirmed," replied Sensor Officer Wren, his bioluminescent skin dimming with what could only be fear. 49 vessels. Unknown configuration. They exited fold space simultaneously. 49. Not a patrol group. Not a raiding party. An extermination fleet. They filled the display in a perfect sphere around the station. Black silhouettes against the distant stars. Their formations precise to a degree that spoke of long practice. Large capital ships anchored the outer positions while smaller, faster attack craft drifted between them like predators circling wounded prey. No communication request. No identification signal. No hesitation. "They're locking weapons," Rin whispered. As if in answer, the second impact struck. This one was stronger. The station groaned under the force as shields flared to life, glowing faintly against the void. Energy readings spiked across every system panel. "Direct hit on outer shield layer," another officer called out. "They're not probing. They're firing at full combat output." Thalai's mandibles tightened. "No warning," she said quietly. "No demand for surrender." "They didn't come to negotiate," Security Chief Varric growled, his massive frame looming near the weapons console. "They came to erase us." On the main display, one of the enemy ships shifted position. It was larger than the others, long, angular, built like a blade designed to cut through anything in its path. And then, as if the universe itself wanted to remove any last trace of doubt, a transmission forced its way through their communication systems. The screen flickered. A face appeared, scaled, scarred, cold, unidentified station, the figure said, its voice low and resonant, carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "You are in violation of Draxian territorial expansion." The Lay stepped forward. "This is Orialis Station," she replied, "a civilian mining and trade hub operating under cooperative protection. Your presence here is unlawful. Identify yourself." The creature's eyes narrowed slightly, as if amused. "I am Fleet Marshal Korthak of the Draxian Dominion." A murmur spread across the command deck. The Dominion. Everyone had heard of them. World breakers. System burners. A species that did not conquer. They consumed. "You will power down all systems," Korthak continued, his tone unchanged. "You will open your docking bays. You will submit to processing." Processing, the Lay asked, though she already knew the answer. Korthak's expression did not change. Your station contains resources of value. Your population will be evaluated for labor viability. Non-viable elements will be terminated. Silence, not the quiet of peace. The kind of silence that comes when hope fractures all at once. Behind the Lay, someone whispered, "There are over 40,000 civilians aboard." The number hung in the air like a death sentence. The Lay held Korthak's gaze. "You're talking about slaughtering tens of thousands of sentient beings." "Yes," Korthak replied simply. "No anger, no cruelty, just fact. You have one standard cycle to comply," he added. "After that, we begin disassembly." The transmission ended. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the station shook again as another volley struck the shields, brighter this time, harder. "They've increased firing intensity," Rin said, his voice tighter now. "Shield integrity down to 92%. 92 becomes 0 fast at that rate," Varric muttered. The Lay turned away from the now empty screen and looked around the command deck. Different species, different worlds, different histories, all of them about to end in the same place. "How many evacuation ships do we have?" she asked. 8 operational transports," came the reply. "Maximum capacity, 8,000. Maybe a little more if we overload life support." 8,000 out of 40,000. The math was simple and merciless. "They're targeting our launch bays," another officer added. "If they destroy those, evacuation won't even be an option." Below them, deep within the civilian sectors, panic had fully taken hold. Families crowded into emergency shelters, clutching each other as the station trembled around them. Children cried out in confusion, their voices rising above the chaos. Some species prayed. Others simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process what was happening. A small hatchling, barely old enough to understand language, looked up at its parent and asked the question none of them could answer. "Are we going to die?" The parent hesitated, then pulled the child closer. "No," they said softly. "A lie." On the command deck, the Lay stared at the tactical display again. 49 ships, perfect formation, unrelenting fire, no reinforcements within range, no allies close enough to matter. The nearest cooperative fleet was weeks away. They had hours, maybe less. Another impact slammed into the shields, stronger than before. The energy barrier flared, flickered, and for just a fraction of a second dimmed. "They're testing for weak points now," Rin said, "adjusting targeting patterns." "Of course they are," Varric growled. "They've done this before." Yes, that was the worst part. This wasn't chaos. This was routine. To them, Orialis Station wasn't a battle. It was a process, something they had done, over and over again, across countless systems. The Lay exhaled slowly. "Broadcast a distress signal," she said. "It's already transmitting," Communications Officer Lyra replied. "All frequencies. Continuous loop. Any response?" Lyra hesitated, then shook her head. "Nothing yet." There wouldn't be. Not in time. Another tremor ran through the station as yet another barrage struck the shields. Each hit draining power, each impact bringing them closer to the inevitable. The Lay placed one hand on the console, steadying herself as she looked out through the reinforced viewport at the distant stars. Somewhere out there, help might exist. Somewhere, someone might be able to do something. But space was vast, and time was cruel. Behind her, alarms continued to scream. Civilians continued to panic. Systems continued to fail. And outside, the fleet tightened its formation, patient and methodical, like predators that already knew how the hunt would end. The Lay closed her eyes for just a moment, then opened them again. "Divert all non-essential power to shields," she ordered. "Prepare emergency evacuation protocols, and get every off-duty crew member down to the civilian sectors." Her voice did not shake. "They came here expecting an easy harvest," she said quietly. Another impact lit up the void outside. "Let's make them work for it." But even as she said it, even as her crew moved to obey, even as the station fought to hold itself together, every being on Orialis Station understood the truth. They were already dead. They just didn't know exactly when it would happen. On the bridge of the Draxian flagship, there was no alarm, no urgency, no raised voices or frantic movement, only quiet efficiency. Fleet Marshal Korthak stood at the center of the command platform, his clawed hands folded behind his back as he observed the battle unfolding beyond the reinforced viewport. The distant station shimmered under sustained bombardment, its shields flaring again and again like a dying star refusing to go dark. He had seen it many times before, the moment when resistance began to break. "Shield integrity at 87%, reported his tactical officer, a lean-scaled subordinate whose voice carried neither excitement nor concern. "Enemy defensive response remains minimal." Korthak gave a slight nod. "They understand," he said. "Understood what, Marshal?" the officer asked. "That they cannot win." Another volley of plasma fire streaked across the void, impacting the station's shield grid in perfect sequence. The Draxian fleet did not fire chaotically. Every shot was measured, timed, calculated to maintain constant pressure without wasting energy. They were not trying to destroy the station quickly. They were breaking it, piece by piece, system by system, mind by mind. "Maintain current firing pattern," Korthak ordered. "Increase output by 3% every standard hour. I want their shield failure to coincide with peak psychological degradation." "Yes, Marshal." Around him, the bridge crew carried out their duties with precise, almost mechanical discipline. Displays shifted, energy readings adjusted, firing solutions recalculated in real time. Every member of the crew knew their role. They had performed this operation dozens of times. "Any response from the station?" Korthak asked. "Distress signal detected," the communications officer replied, "broadcasting on all known frequencies." "Of course they are." Korthak turned slightly, his gaze drifting back toward the distant structure. From this range, it was little more than a faint silhouette against the stars, but he could already imagine the chaos inside. The panic, the confusion, the futile hope. "Has any fleet acknowledged their signal?" "No, Marshal. Nearest cooperative response force is estimated to be several cycles away." "Then they are alone." There was no satisfaction in his tone, no cruelty, just confirmation. Behind him, one of the junior officers hesitated before speaking. "Marshal, permission to ask a question." Korthak did not turn. "Granted. Why do we not simply destroy the station now? Our weapons could penetrate their shields with concentrated fire. It would be faster." A brief silence followed, not because the question was offensive, but because it was naive. Korthak slowly turned his head, fixing the officer with a steady, unblinking stare. "Efficiency is not measured in speed," he said. The officer stiffened. "Then in what, Marshal?" "In yield." Korthak stepped forward slightly, gesturing toward the tactical display. It expanded at his command, projecting a detailed breakdown of the station's structure, population density, and resource distribution. "This station contains mineral reserves, refined materials, and technological infrastructure of significant value," he said. "If we destroy it outright, we lose a substantial percentage of that yield." He shifted his gaze. "Additionally, living populations provide labor. Processing viable subjects increases long-term productivity." The officer nodded slowly. "And the bombardment?" "Serves multiple functions," Korthak replied. "It weakens their defenses, depletes their power reserves, and destabilizes their internal systems. More importantly," he paused, "it removes their will to resist." Another barrage struck the station, brighter this time. Even from this distance, the shield flare was visible. They are already beginning to understand their position, Korthak continued. Fear accelerates compliance. Compliance preserves resources. The officer swallowed. Yes, Marshal. Korthak turned away again, returning his attention to the battle. Continue. Across the fleet, the formation held perfectly. 49 ships arranged in a flawless sphere, each one positioned to eliminate any possible escape vector. Their spacing was exact. Their firing arcs overlapped with mathematical precision. No gaps, no weaknesses. A prison made of warships. Report on escape attempts, Korthak said. 8 transport vessels launched shortly after initial contact. The tactical officer replied. All were intercepted and destroyed. Survivors? None. Good. The word carried no emotion. It didn't need to. Ensure continued coverage of all docking vectors, Korthak added. No vessel leaves this system. Yes, Marshal. On one of the lower displays, a simulation played out in real time. It showed the station's projected shield collapse curve, energy depletion rates, and structural integrity thresholds. At the current rate of fire, the outcome was inevitable. Estimated time to shield failure? Korthak asked. 34 standard hours, came the reply. Possibly sooner if we increase output. Korthak considered that, then shook his head. No. Maintain the current escalation pattern. Marshal, I want them to watch it happen. The officer did not question further. There was no need. Korthak had built his reputation on victories like this. Slow, controlled, absolute. He had overseen the fall of 42 worlds and installations across multiple systems. Each one had followed the same turn. Each one had ended the same way. Resistance, realization, collapse. Bring up historical comparison, he ordered. The display shifted, overlaying previous engagements onto the current scenario. The similarities were almost perfect. Formation structure, firing cadence, enemy response patterns. Predictable. All of it. They always react the same way, Korthak said quietly. Initial panic, attempted evacuation, defensive consolidation, then hope. Hope, Marshal? The communications officer asked. Yes. Korthak's gaze hardened slightly. They convinced themselves that someone will come, that help is on the way, that they only need to hold out long enough. Another impact lit up the void. They are always wrong. Silence settled over the bridge again. Not uncomfortable, not tense, just certain. Continue monitoring their distress signal, Korthak said. If any vessel enters the system, I want immediate notification. Yes, Marshal. And increase sensor range beyond the system edge. I want full awareness of any potential interference. Understood. The officer hesitated briefly before adding, We are detecting minor fluctuations at extreme range. Likely background interference. Korthak didn't even look at the display. Ignore it. Yes, Marshal. Outside, the bombardment continued. Relentless. Measured. Each strike, weakening the station just a little more. Each impact, bringing them closer to the end. On the main display, the station's shield integrity dropped another percentage point. 86. Then 85. Korthak watched without blinking. Prepare boarding contingents, he said. I want extraction teams ready the moment their defenses fail. Yes, Marshal. All units will be on standby. Good. He clasped his hands behind his back, once more, posture perfectly straight as he observed the slow unraveling of yet another target. To him, this was not war. Not really. War implied uncertainty, risk, the possibility of defeat. This was procedure, a system to be processed, a population to be sorted, a resource to be claimed. Nothing more. By this time tomorrow, one of the officers said quietly, almost to himself, it will be over. Korthak heard him, and for the first time, a faint, Almost imperceptible smile touched the edges of his scarred face. "Yes," he said, "it will." The second day felt longer than the first, not because time had changed, but because fear stretched it. Every minute carried weight now. Every second was measured against the slow, inevitable collapse of the shields. The station no longer felt like a place of work or life. It felt like a waiting room for death. In the civilian sectors, the noise had changed. The panic from the first hours had burned itself out, leaving something quieter behind. Not calm, not peace, just exhaustion. People spoke in lower voices, moved more slowly, held each other a little tighter. Emergency shelters overflowed with bodies packed shoulder to shoulder. Species that had never shared space before now sat side by side, united by a single, crushing reality. The air was heavy with recycled oxygen and unspoken thoughts. A young child clung to their parent, their small fingers gripping tightly as the station trembled again. "Is it going to break?" the child asked. The parent hesitated, eyes flicking toward the reinforced ceiling as another distant impact echoed through the structure. "No," they said softly. "The shields are strong." Another lie. Across the room, a group of miners sat in silence, their work suits still stained with dust from the lower levels. One of them stared blankly at the wall, his mind replaying the moment the alarms had sounded. Another quietly cleaned a tool that would be useless against what waited outside. "What do you think they'll do when the shields fail?" one of them asked. No one answered, because everyone already knew. In the medical bay, the situation was worse. Dr. Cyril moved quickly between patients, her hands steady despite the fatigue weighing down every movement. She had been working without rest since the first impact, treating injuries from falling debris, power surges, and structural failures. But those weren't the injuries that worried her. It was what was coming. "Status?" she asked one of her assistants. "Capacity exceeded," the assistant replied. "We've converted 3 additional corridors into triage zones, but we're still running out of space." Cyril nodded. "And supplies?" "Dwindling. We're already rationing advanced treatments." Another tremor shook the station, stronger than the last. Lights flickered overhead, casting the room into momentary darkness. Before emergency systems kicked in, a small figure on one of the medical beds flinched at the vibration. The child's wide eyes turned towards Cyril as she approached. "Are they still out there?" the child asked. Cyril knelt beside the bed, her expression softening. "Yes," she said gently. "Why?" The question lingered in the air. Simple, impossible to answer. Cyril hesitated for just a moment before speaking. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "there are people who take things because they can." The child frowned slightly, trying to understand. "Will someone stop them?" Cyril looked at the small, fragile form in front of her, at the fear, at the hope. She reached out and placed a hand over the child's. "Yes," she said. Another lie. On the command deck, the atmosphere was different, not quieter, sharper. Every system report, every update, every flicker of data mattered now. "Shield integrity at 71%, Rin reported. "They've increased firing frequency again." "They're accelerating the timetable," Varric muttered. "They're getting impatient." The lay stood at the center of the room, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. The enemy formation hadn't changed. It didn't need to. They were winning. Slowly, inevitably. "Power reserves?" she asked. "Dropping," another officer replied. "We've diverted everything we can to the shields. Non-essential systems are offline. Even some essential ones are running at minimal capacity." "How long?" The officer hesitated. "At this rate, less than 30 hours. "Less than 30 hours. For 40,000 lives." The lay closed her eyes briefly. "Evacuation status?" "Still ongoing, but..." The communications officer paused. "There's unrest in the lower sectors. People are starting to realize not everyone will get out. Of course they were. You couldn't hide numbers like that forever. Maintain order, the lay said. Do whatever you need to do, but keep those evacuation routes clear. Yes, Commander. Another impact rocked the station. Stronger, closer. They're targeting infrastructure now, Rin said. Power conduits, structural supports. They're softening us up for collapse. The lay didn't respond, because there was nothing to say. She turned slightly, her gaze drifting toward the viewport. The distant stars were still there, unchanged, indifferent to what was happening here. Somewhere out there, help should have been coming. Somewhere, fleets should have been mobilizing. But distance was a cruel thing. It didn't care about urgency. It didn't care about lives. Commander, Lyra said suddenly, we're still receiving our own distress signal echo. The lay glanced at her. Echo. Yes. It's bouncing through relay points, spreading outward. By now, half the sector should have it. Any response? Lyra shook her head slowly. Nothing yet. Of course not. Even if someone had received it, even if someone had decided to help, they would be too far away. Another tremor. Another drop in shield integrity. 70%. 69. Each number felt heavier than the last. Below them, in the deeper levels of the station, Chief Engineer Derek worked in near darkness. Most of the lighting systems had been shut down to conserve power. Only emergency strips cast a dim glow across the machinery as he moved between consoles, rerouting energy, overriding safety protocols, pushing systems far beyond their intended limits. Reactor output is peaking, one of his assistants warned. If we push any harder, it won't matter if we don't, Derek snapped. The shields go down, we're done. He slammed a control panel, forcing more energy into the shield grid. The entire station seemed to shudder in response. We're buying time, he muttered. How much? The assistant asked. Derek didn't answer, because he didn't know, because it wasn't enough. Somewhere above them, something exploded. The shockwave rippled through the structure, sending a cascade of warnings across every display. Structural damage on levels 12 through 15, came a voice over the comms. Multiple hull breaches. Emergency teams responding. Derek clenched his jaw. Seal it, he said. Seal everything. We'll trap people. I know. Silence. Then quietly, do it. Back in the civilian shelters, the air had grown colder. Not physically, emotionally. People had stopped asking if they would survive. Now they were asking when it would end. A group of children sat together in one corner, huddled close as an older civilian tried to distract them with stories. Tales of distant worlds, of heroes and explorers, of civilizations that had overcome impossible odds. The children listened. Some believed, some didn't. One of them looked up suddenly. Do you think someone will come? The storyteller paused, just for a moment, then smiled gently. Yes, they said, someone will come. Across the station, in every shelter, in every corridor, in every quiet corner where fear had taken hold, that same fragile hope existed. Not because it was logical, not because it was likely, but because the alternative was too heavy to carry. On the command deck, the lay watched as another section of the station went dark on the display. Power failure. Systems offline. Shields dropping again. 65%. They're winning, someone whispered. The lay didn't correct them, because it was true. Outside, the enemy fleet remained perfectly still, unchanged, unchallenged, a wall of inevitability. And inside the station, 40,000 beings waited, not for victory, not for rescue, but for something, anything, that could change what was coming. Even if, deep down, they no longer believed it would. It started as a fluctuation no one had time to care about, buried beneath layers of combat telemetry, shield harmonics, and structural failure reports. A faint anomaly flickered across the long-range sensors. It was weak, inconsistent, easily mistaken for background interference. Under normal circumstances, it would have been flagged, analyzed, and investigated. These were not normal circumstances. Shield integrity at 62%, Rin reported, his voice tight as another impact rolled through the station. They're focusing fire on the southern grid now. We're losing cohesion in the barrier. Reroute what you can, the Lay replied, barely glancing away from the tactical display. Keep it stable. I'm trying, but... Try harder. Another tremor. Another flicker of light. Another system warning. And beneath it all, unnoticed by most, the anomaly pulsed again. On a secondary console, a junior sensor technician frowned. "Commander," they said hesitantly, "I'm picking up something unusual at extreme range." No one responded at first. There were too many urgent things happening closer to home. "Define unusual," the Lay said after a moment, her attention still locked on the shrinking shield perimeter. "It's hard to classify," the technician replied. "It looks like fold space distortion, but the pattern is wrong. Too large, too unstable." That got her attention. The Lay turned slightly. "Show me." The display shifted, isolating the signal from the surrounding noise. At first glance, it looked like static, random fluctuations at the edge of sensor range. Then it pulsed again, stronger, more defined. "What am I looking at?" Varric asked. "Not sure," the technician admitted. "It's not a natural phenomenon, and it's not following standard transit signatures either." Rin leaned closer, his bioluminescent patterns flickering as he processed the data. "If that's a ship," he said slowly, "it's moving far beyond regulated fold velocities." "How far?" the Lay asked. The technician hesitated. "Beyond safety margins. By a lot." Silence settled over the console. Every species in known space followed the same fundamental rules when it came to fold travel. The physics were well understood. The risks were not theoretical. Go too fast, and the ship would tear itself apart. Exit too close to real space, and you risked catastrophic collision. There were limits. Strict limits. Could it be a cooperative fleet pushing their engines? Varric suggested. Rin shook his head immediately. No. Even in an emergency, no commander would risk their entire fleet like that. The structural stress alone. Another impact shook the station, cutting him off. "Focus," the Lay said. "We don't have time for speculation. Can you identify the source?" "I'm trying," the technician replied, fingers moving rapidly across the controls. "But the interference from the bombardment is scrambling long-range resolution. Whatever it is, it's still deep in fold space." "How long until it reaches real space?" the Lay asked. The technician ran the calculations, paused, checked them again, then looked up, something like disbelief in their expression. "If these readings are accurate, how long?" 14 hours. 14 hours. The Lay felt something shift in her chest. Not hope. Not yet. Just something. "The shields won't last that long," Rin said quietly. "At current degradation rates, we'll be gone in less than 30. And if they increase firepower? Less." Varric crossed his arms. "So whatever that is, it's too late." "Probably," the Lay said. "Probably." The word lingered. "Keep monitoring it," she added. "If it changes course or drops out of fold space, I want to know immediately." "Yes, Commander." The anomaly pulsed again. Stronger this time. Closer. On the other side of the battlefield, aboard the Draxian flagship, similar readings began to appear. "Marshal, the science," officer said, turning from their console. "We are detecting irregularities at the system's outer boundary." Korthak didn't look away from the main display. "Define." "Fold space distortions. Large scale. Possibly multiple sources, though the signal is unclear. Origin. Unknown. The pattern does not match any known transit signatures." Korthak, considered that for a moment. Could it be a response fleet? One of the officers asked. Unlikely, the science officer replied. The velocities involved would exceed all established safety protocols. No organized fleet would risk such maneuvers. Then it's irrelevant, Korthak said. The officer hesitated. Marshal, should we investigate further? Korthak finally turned his head slightly. Is it within immediate threat range? No. Is it interfering with our current operation? No. Then ignore it. Yes, Marshal. The matter was dismissed as quickly as it had appeared. Outside, the bombardment continued without pause. On Orialis Station, the hours dragged forward. The anomaly grew. It didn't stabilize. It didn't slow down. If anything, it became more erratic, more intense, as though whatever was causing it was pushing against the very fabric of fold space itself. Commander, the technician called out again several hours later. The distortion is increasing. Rapidly. Belay stepped closer. Update. It's accelerating. That's not possible. Rin said immediately. You can't increase velocity like that in fold space without tearing your ship apart, Varric finished. Exactly. But the readings didn't care about what was possible. They continued to climb. Higher. Faster. More unstable. Recalculate time to arrival, the lay said. The technician ran the numbers again. Hands moving faster now. Breathing slightly uneven. Then, it's changed. How much? 10 hours. 10. The room went still. That's not natural, Rin said. No, the lay agreed. Another tremor shook the station as the shields flared again, weaker this time. 58%. Send a warning, the lay said suddenly. To what? Lyra asked. To whatever that is. Lyra blinked. Commander, if it's still in fold space. It won't receive it in time, I know, the lay said. But send it anyway. A brief pause. Then, yes, Commander. The transmission array powered up, pushing what little energy they could spare into a focused burst. This is Orialis Station, Lyra began, her voice steady despite everything. Unidentified vessel approaching this system. Be advised, you are entering an active combat zone. 49 hostile warships present. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. The message repeated, over and over, fading into the void. Whether anyone would hear it was another matter entirely. Hours passed. The anomaly continued to grow, now visible even through the noise of battle. A distortion in reality itself. Warping sensor readings. Bending light at the edge of perception. 8 hours. The technician said. Shields at 51%, Rin added. 7 hours. 48%. 6 hours. 45%. The numbers ticked down together. 2 countdowns. 1 to destruction. 1 to something else. In the civilian sectors, people felt it before they understood it. A subtle shift. A vibration that wasn't coming from the bombardment. A strange pressure in the air. Like the station itself, was reacting to something distant but approaching fast. What is that? Someone whispered. No one answered. On the command deck, every eye was now fixed on the sensor display. The anomaly wasn't subtle anymore. It was massive, violent, unstable in a way that defied every known law of physics. It's going to tear itself apart before it gets here, Varric said. Maybe, the lay replied. But she didn't sound convinced. 5 hours. Outside, the enemy fleet held its formation, unmoved, unconcerned, still confident, still certain. They had seen no reason to change, no reason to prepare, no reason to believe that anything out there could possibly matter. Inside the station, the countdown continued. 4 hours. Shields at 42%. 3 hours. 39. The anomaly burned brighter on the sensors. Closer now. Too fast. Far too fast. And for the first time since the attack began, something new crept into the command deck. Not hope. Not yet. but something close, something dangerous. Uncertainty. The ship was not supposed to be there. Not in that system. Not at that speed. Not under those conditions. Inside the collapsing tunnel of fold space, the hull screamed. Metal groaned under stresses it had never been designed to endure. Warning lights flooded every deck in violent red pulses as the structure strained against physics itself. The air vibrated with the deep, constant hum of engines being pushed far beyond safe limits. On the bridge, Captain Aria Vance didn't move. Her hands rested lightly on the arms of her command chair, knuckles pale, eyes fixed on the forward display where reality twisted and folded in impossible colors. Around her, the crew worked through controlled chaos, voices sharp but steady, each report cutting through the noise with practiced precision. Engine output, at 132%, called the chief engineer over comms. We are officially past the point of bad idea and entering historically stupid. A few tired laughs rippled across the bridge. Arya didn't smile. Noted, she said calmly. How long can you keep it together? A pause. Then, long enough to regret it, Captain. Good. That's all we need. Another violent shudder tore through the ship as a fold wave slammed into the hull. The inertial dampeners struggled to compensate, but not perfectly. Even through the system buffers, the crew could feel the crushing force pressing against their bodies. Structural integrity holding at 70%, the tactical officer reported. Recommend immediate deceleration. Denied. The response came instantly. No hesitation. Captain, the officer pressed. If we don't reduce velocity, we risk catastrophic emergence failure. Arya leaned forward slightly. If we slow down, 40,000 people die. Silence. No one argued after that. At the rear of the bridge, the ship's AI spoke, its voice calm, measured, and completely unconcerned with human stubbornness. Captain, current trajectory violates all known safety protocols for fold space travel. Probability of successful emergence at current velocity, 26%. Arya nodded once. What's the probability for the station if we don't get there in time? A brief pause. Then, 0%. Then 26 is generous. She settled back into her chair. Maintain course. Around her, the crew exchanged brief glances. Not fear, not doubt, just understanding. They had all seen the distress signal. They had all seen the numbers. 49 enemy ships. 1 civilian station. No chance of survival. They hadn't needed orders to make the decision. When the signal came in, there had been a vote. It had taken less than 10 seconds. Go. Every single one of them had agreed, even knowing what it meant. Time to emergence. Arya asked. 3 hours, 12 minutes. Replied the navigation officer. Assuming we don't disintegrate first. Let's try not to, Arya said dryly. Another ripple tore through fold space, twisting the visual field ahead into something that barely resembled reality. Colors stretched, distances warped, the laws of physics bent under the strain of their velocity. Most species found fold space terrifying. Humans treated it like an obstacle to be ignored. Captain, the medical officer called from her station. I feel obligated to remind you that sustained exposure to these G-forces can result in organ failure, neural damage, and death. Noted, Arya replied. How long can the crew endure this? The doctor hesitated. We passed safe limits 2 days ago. A faint smirk touched the captain's lips. Then we're in bonus time. Another wave hit. Harder. The ship bucked violently, alarms screaming louder as several systems flickered. Minor hull fractures on decks 6 through 9, the engineer reported. Nothing critical yet. Keep it that way. On the forward display, the distortion began to shift, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Captain, navigation said, voice tightening slightly. We're approaching emergence threshold. How long? 2 hours. Maybe less if we keep accelerating. Do it, Captain. Do it. A beat. Then, aye. The engines roared louder. The ship surged forward. Full space itself seemed to protest, the tunnel collapsing and reforming around them as if trying to tear them apart. Velocity increasing, Tactical reported. We are now exceeding all recorded combat entry speeds. Good, Arya said quietly. That means they won't expect us. On a side display, the projected battlefield appeared. Orialis Station. 49 enemy ships. Perfect formation. Perfect control. Arya studied it for a moment. Then, zoom in. The image expanded, focusing on the fleet. Look at that formation, she said. The tactical officer nodded. Standard siege configuration. Tight sphere. No escape vectors. They've done this before. Yes, Captain. Arya's eyes narrowed slightly. Good. Good, the officer repeated. Predictable enemies are easier to kill. A few heads turned at that, not because of the statement, but because of how casually it was said. Run engagement simulations, Arya ordered. The AI responded immediately. Simulations complete. Outcome: unfavorable. Probability of victory: less than 3%. Arya didn't even look at the numbers. We're not here to win. The bridge went quiet. We're here to buy time, she continued. Every second we keep them busy is another second those people get to live. No one argued. No one questioned, because that had been the mission from the start. Not victory, not survival, just time. Captain, weapons called out. Weapons systems are online. Mass drivers loaded. Particle arrays charged. Set targeting parameters. A pause. Captain, at our current velocity, firing solutions will have a margin of error measured in microseconds. Arya nodded. Then don't miss. Another ripple. Stronger. Closer. Emergence in 90 minutes. Navigation reported. The bridge lights dimmed slightly as power shifted across the ship, systems prioritizing what mattered most. Engines, weapons, shields. Everything else was secondary. Captain, the AI said again, I must reiterate. Current approach violates fundamental principles of space combat as understood by all known species. Arya leaned forward, her gaze locked on the collapsing tunnel ahead. Exactly, she said. That's why it'll work. Around her, the crew straightened, hands tightened on controls. Breathing slowed. They were no longer just racing toward a destination. They were committing, fully, irreversibly, 30 minutes to emergence. The tunnel began to collapse faster now, reality pressing in from all sides as the ship forced its way back into normal space. Final systems check, Arya ordered. Engines, critical but holding. Weapons ready. Shields, stable at maximum. Life support strained. Good enough. She activated the ship-wide channel. All hands, she said, her voice carrying through every deck, every corridor, every compartment of the ship. We're about to drop into a live combat zone. 49 hostile vessels. Civilian station under siege. A pause. I won't lie to you. The odds aren't good. No one moved. No one spoke. But we didn't come here because the odds were good. A few quiet smiles appeared. We came because someone needed help. Another pause, and we were close enough to answer. Across the ship, 800 crew members listened in silence. Some closed their eyes. Some tightened their grip on whatever they were holding. Some just stared forward. Ready. 10 minutes, navigation said. Arya took a slow breath. Then, let's remind them, she said softly, why that was a mistake. The countdown began, and for the first time since the attack on Orialis Station had started, something was coming. Fast, reckless, and completely, utterly human. The ship didn't slow down. It exploded into real space like a weapon. One moment, the battlefield was silent except for the steady rhythm of bombardment. The next, reality tore open, and something came screaming out of it at a velocity no sane commander would ever attempt. On Orialis Station, every sensor detonated with warnings. Contact! Rin shouted. Massive fold breach. Single vessel. Velocity. He stopped. Checked again. Then again. That's not possible. Say it. The lay demanded. 0.16 light speed and accelerating. Silence crushed the command deck. No ship could survive that. No ship should even exist at that speed. What is it? Varric asked. Rin's glow flickered rapidly as he processed the impossible data. Human. Outside the viewport, it appeared, a streak of white fire ripping through the void, engines blazing like a newborn star, its trajectory cutting straight through the heart of the Draxian formation. Not approaching, not maneuvering, charging. On the flagship, Korthak's eyes narrowed. Report. Single vessel, Marshal. The tactical officer said, voice tight for the first time. Unknown configuration, energy signature inconsistent with any recorded design. Velocity. A pause. Extreme. Korthak didn't like pauses. Clarify. It is not decelerating. That got his attention. Impossible. Yes, Marshal. The ship didn't change course. Didn't hesitate. Didn't acknowledge. It came straight at them like something that had already decided how this would end. Intercept, Korthak ordered. Send 2 destroyers. Eliminate it. Across the formation, 2 warships broke away, engines flaring as they accelerated to meet the incoming threat. They moved with confidence, their weapons charging as targeting systems locked onto the rapidly approaching contact. On the human vessel, Captain Aria Vance didn't blink. Targets acquired, her tactical officer said. 2 enemy destroyers on intercept vector. Range. For million kilometers and closing fast. Aria leaned forward. Slightly. Effective range. Mass drivers can fire now. Particle beams in 60 seconds. Then let's not wait. A breath. Fire. 8 slugs launched from the ship's forward mass drivers, each one accelerated to a fraction of light speed. Dense, silent, unstoppable. On the Draxian destroyer Blood Talon, the crew had 3 seconds to live. 3 seconds to register the incoming objects. 3 seconds to understand that their targeting systems had failed. 3 seconds to realize they were already dead. The slugs hit. The shields didn't slow them. The armor didn't matter. The ship ceased to exist. It didn't explode at first. It came apart, torn open from the inside as kinetic force ripped through every layer of its structure. Then the reactor went, and the void bloomed with fire. The second destroyer tried to turn. Too slow. 1 slug clipped its flank, shearing off entire sections of hull. The vessel spun out of control, atmosphere venting into space as its systems collapsed in seconds. 2 targets neutralized, the human tactical officer reported, voice steady. Time to main fleet. 8 minutes. Aria nodded once. Good. Behind her, the AI spoke again. Captain, current engagement pattern remains unprecedented. That's one word for it. The ship surged forward, faster, deeper into the enemy formation. On Orialis Station, the command deck watched in stunned silence. They destroyed them, someone whispered. With 2 shots, another added. The lay didn't speak. She couldn't, because the human ship wasn't stopping. It was accelerating. Velocity now 0.17 light speed, Rin said, his voice almost reverent. They're not even trying to slow down. They're insane, Varric muttered. No, the lay said quietly. They're committed. On the flagship, Korthak felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, not yet, but the edge of it. All ships, he commanded, his voice cutting through the bridge. Defensive formation. Concentrate fire on the incoming vessel. The fleet shifted. 47 ships adjusting position. Weapons turning as one. Energy building across dozens of firing arrays. The human ship didn't care. Range 500,000 kilometers, the tactical officer reported. Open fire. The void lit up. Particle beams, plasma bolts, photon torpedoes. An entire fleet unleashed everything it had at a single target. The human ship moved. Not like a cruiser. Not like anything that size had any right to move. It twisted, rolled, dove through the storm of incoming fire with violent, impossible precision. Shots that should have hit past through empty space, where it had been fractions of a second earlier. Return fire, Arya said. The ship answered. Particle beams lanced out, cutting across enemy vessels with surgical accuracy. Mass driver rounds followed, punching through shields and armor like they weren't there. One ship detonated, then another, and another. Each second, another piece of the Draxian formation vanished. They can't track it, one of Korthak's officers shouted. Adjust targeting. It's too fast. The human ship tore through the outer ring like a blade. Inside, alarms screamed as impacts finally began to land. Direct hit, the engineer called. Starboard side. Minor hull breach. Shields. 80% dropping. The ship shuddered but didn't slow. Didn't hesitate. Maintain course, Arya said. Another explosion rocked the hull. 70%. We're taking too many hits. We knew we would. Her voice never rose. Never broke. Keep firing. They did. The ship plunged deeper into the formation. Weapons blazing, engines howling, systems failing one by one under the strain. Behind them, a trail of wreckage. Ahead of them, the heart of the fleet. Captain, the AI said, we are exceeding all survivability projections. Good. Clarification. That means we're doing it right. Another impact. Harder. The bridge lights flickered. Mass driver 4 offline. Particle array 2 down. Structural integrity at 50%. The numbers kept falling, but so did the enemy. On Orialis Station, the shield percentage froze. Then, ticked upward. Commander, Rin said, disbelief in his voice. Their fire, it's shifting. The Draxian fleet was turning, focusing, every weapon redirecting toward the human ship. The bombardment on the station faltered, then stopped. For the first time since the attack began. Silence. They're pulling back, Varric said. No, the Lay whispered. They're being pulled. Every ship in the enemy fleet now faced one target. One impossible, reckless, unstoppable target tearing through their formation. On the human bridge, Arya saw it. They're focusing us. Yes, Captain, Tactical replied. All remaining ships are locking weapons. Good. She leaned forward. Then let's make it count. The ship shook violently as dozens of impacts slammed into its shields. Shields at 40%, 35. Multiple hull breaches. The smell of burning systems filled the air. Sparks flew from consoles. Crew members were thrown against restraints as the inertial dampeners struggled to keep up. Still, they kept going. Still, they kept firing. We're not going to last much longer, the engineer said. I know. Arya's eyes were fixed on one point ahead, the largest ship in the formation, the flagship. Set course, she said quietly. Direct intercept. The tactical officer froze for half a second. Then, route all remaining power to forward weapons. Captain, that will shut down life support, gravity. I know. The bridge went silent. Everyone understood. This was the end. But it was also the point. Do it. Systems across the ship began to die. Lights dimmed. Gravity flickered. Then vanished. Air thinned. But at the front of the ship, power gathered. Everything they had left. Every last ounce of energy. Focused. Condensed. Ready. Final firing solution locked. The tactical officer said, voice tight. Range. 200,000 kilometers. Behind them, the fleet closed in. Weapons charging. Death seconds away. Arya took a breath. Then, "For the station," she said softly. Fire. The beam that erupted from the ship wasn't just a weapon. It was everything. A line of pure, blinding energy that tore across space and slammed into the Draxian flagship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ship came apart. Not exploded. Erased. Shields collapsed instantly. Armor disintegrated. The core went critical, and the resulting detonation consumed everything around it in a violent burst of light. 3 more ships vanished in the blast. The formation shattered. What remained of the fleet broke, turned, ran. On Orialis Station, the command deck stood frozen. The battlefield emptying. The impossible real. "They're retreating," Rin whispered. The Lay didn't respond. Her eyes were locked on one thing. The human ship, drifting, broken, silent, but still there, still between them, and everything that had tried to destroy them. Silence came slowly, not all at once, but in fragments. First, the weapons fire stopped. Then the distant explosions faded. Then, one by one, the alarms inside Orialis Station quieted, replaced by something almost unfamiliar. Stillness. On the command deck, no one spoke. They simply stared at the tactical display as the last of the Draxian ships broke formation and vanished into the dark, their retreat disorganized, desperate. Nothing like the perfect precision they had shown before. "They're gone," Rin said quietly, as if saying it too loudly might somehow bring them back. Varric exhaled heavily, his massive frame lowering slightly as the tension drained from his body. "I don't believe it. Neither did anyone else. 49 warships. Gone. Driven off by a single vessel." The Lay didn't look at the empty space where the enemy fleet had been. Her eyes were fixed on the other signal. Faint, damaged, but still there. "Status on the unknown ship," she said. Rin swallowed, barely holding together. "Multiple hull breaches. Power output critical. I'm not even sure how it's still intact. Life signs." A pause. "Yes. Reduced, but present." That was enough. "Prepare rescue teams," the Lay ordered. "Every available transport. Medical units on standby." "Yes, Commander." The command deck came back to life instantly, officers moving with renewed urgency. But it was different now. The fear was gone, replaced by purpose. Below, in the civilian sectors, word spread faster than any official announcement. The attacks had stopped. The shaking had ended. The silence meant something. People emerged slowly from shelters, hesitant at first, as if expecting the nightmare to resume at any moment. It didn't. A child stepped into the corridor, looking around with wide, uncertain eyes. "Is it over?" they asked. This time, no one lied. "Yes," someone whispered. "It's over." And just like that, the station exhaled. Not in celebration, not yet, but in relief, so deep it almost hurt. Hours later, the first rescue teams reached the drifting human ship. Up close, it looked less like a vessel and more like wreckage that refused to fall apart. The hull was torn open in dozens of places. Entire sections had been burned away or crushed inward. Debris floated slowly around it, fragments of armor and structure still glowing faintly from the heat of battle. "How did this even survive?" one of the rescue crew murmured. No one answered, because there was no answer that made sense. The Lay stood at the airlock as the docking clamps locked into place with a heavy metallic thud. She didn't wait for ceremony or protocol. The moment the pressure equalized, she stepped inside. The corridor beyond was dim, emergency lighting flickering weakly against scorched walls. The air was thin, carrying the sharp scent of burnt metal and something else. Something human. "Spread out," she ordered quietly. "Find survivors." The rescue teams moved quickly, disappearing into the damaged interior. Everywhere they looked, there were signs of the battle. Consoles fused into slag, bulkheads warped from heat, scorch marks lining the walls like scars, and bodies, some still strapped into their stations. Somewhere they had fallen. None of them had left. They stayed, one of the medics whispered. They knew what this was, and they stayed. Further inside, they began to find survivors. Injury reports came in rapidly. Multiple fractures, severe internal trauma, radiation exposure. But alive. Somehow alive. The Lay moved deeper into the ship, her steps slowing as she took in the damage around her. This wasn't just a vessel. It was a statement. Every system pushed past its limits. Every safeguard ignored. Everything sacrificed. For strangers. "Commander," a voice called over the comm. "We found the bridge. I'm coming." The doors had been forced open, twisted metal bent outward as if the ship itself had refused to stay sealed. Inside, the scene was worse. Half the consoles were dark. The rest flickered weakly. Sparks still fell from damaged systems. And at the center of it all, the captain's chair. Aria Vance was still there, barely conscious. Blood traced a thin line across her forehead, her breathing shallow but steady. Around her, what remained of her crew clung to life, some unconscious, some still trying to move despite injuries that should have stopped them. "She needs immediate treatment," the medic said, already moving forward. The Lay raised a hand. "Wait." She stepped closer. Aria's eyes flickered open slightly, unfocused at first. Then slowly, they found her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Different species, different worlds, connected by one impossible moment. "You made it," the Lay said quietly. Aria tried to smile. It didn't quite work. "Looks like it." Her voice was weak, barely more than a whisper. The Lay glanced around the shattered bridge. At great cost. Aria's eyes shifted slightly, taking in her crew. "Worth it." A pause. Then, "The station," she forced out. "Civilians. They're safe," the Lay said. That was enough. The tension left Aria's body in a single, visible moment, as if she had been holding on to consciousness by sheer will alone. "Good," she whispered, her eyes closed. Not in fear, not in pain, just done. "Get her to medical," the Lay said immediately. The medics moved in, carefully lifting the injured captain as others worked to stabilize the remaining survivors. As they carried her out, the Lay stood there for a moment longer, looking at the broken command center, at what it had endured, at what it had done, and then she turned and followed. Days later, Orialis Station was alive again. Damaged, scarred, but alive. Repairs were already underway. Crews working around the clock to restore critical systems. Civilian areas filled once more with movement, with voices, with life that had almost been lost. And everywhere, there were stories. Stories of the moment everything changed. Of the ship that came out of nowhere. Of the battle that shouldn't have been possible. Of the people who chose to fight when they didn't have to. In the medical wing, Aria Vance lay in recovery, surrounded by quiet machinery and careful monitoring. Her injuries were severe, but stable. Humans, it turned out, were difficult to kill. The Lay stood beside the bed, watching as the monitors tracked each slow, steady breath. After a while, Aria stirred. Her eyes opened, focused. "You're still here," Aria murmured. The Lay inclined her head slightly. "I wanted to understand something." Aria shifted slightly, wincing. "That sounds dangerous." The Lay ignored the attempt at humor. "You knew the odds," she said. "You knew you would likely die. Your crew knew." "Yes. And yet you came anyway." Aria looked at her for a long moment. Then, someone asked for help. The Lay waited. For more. For an explanation. For logic. It didn't come. "That's it?" she asked. Aria gave a faint, tired smile. "That's it." Silence stretched between them. Then the Lay nodded slowly. Across the station, in the days that followed, the story spread, not just here, but beyond, through trade routes, through communication relays, through every channel that carried information across the stars. One ship, 49 warships, impossible odds, and a choice. Other species tried to analyze it, to understand it, to make it fit into something logical. They failed, because it wasn't about logic. It was about something else. Something simpler, something more dangerous. In the months that followed, whenever a distress signal echoed through the void, there was a change. Not immediate, not always guaranteed, but noticeable. Because sometimes, before the official fleets could arrive, before the protocols could be followed, something else would answer. A signal, a presence, a ship pushing too fast, flying too hard, ignoring every rule that said it shouldn't. And when it came, it always carried the same unspoken promise. You are not alone. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces between stars, that idea began to spread. Not fear, not power, something far more unsettling. Hope, because now the galaxy understood something it hadn't before. If you called for help, humans would come.